The sky above Keth 4 turned black, not the peaceful black of night that Yuna had loved since childhood, but a living darkness that moved and breathed and consumed everything it touched. Yuna pressed her face against the window of the communications tower. Her large, dark eyes reflected the horror above. Ships. Millions of them. They looked like insects made of bone and metal, twisting through the atmosphere in patterns that made no sense. The Harrow swarm had finally found her world. She was 23 years old. She had never seen violence. None of her people had. The Velans had evolved on a world without predators, without conflict. They had never needed weapons. They had never needed soldiers. For 10,000 years, they had lived under the protection of the Galactic Union, paying their taxes, following the laws, trusting that the elder races would keep them safe. That trust was about to be tested. Yuna, her supervisor, an older Velan named Borum, grabbed her arm. His blue-green skin had turned pale with fear. The primary transmitter is ready. Send the signal now. Yuna ran to her station. Her webbed fingers moved across the controls with desperate speed. She had trained for this moment. Every communications officer learned the emergency protocols. She had never imagined she would actually use them. The message was simple, standard format, priority alpha, extinction level threat, immediate assistance required. She sent it to the Galactic Union Emergency Response Center, located 14 light-years away on the Union capital world. The signal would take only moments to arrive. Help would come. It had to come. Outside, the first bombs fell. The ground shook. Yuna fell from her chair. Through the window, she saw the coastal city of Marin disappear. In a flash of white light, 2 million people. Gone. Just like that, Borum helped her up. His hands were shaking. Did the signal go through? Yes, they received it. They are responding now. The response came 30 seconds later. Yuna read it 3 times, certain she had made a mistake. But the words did not change. Request received. Emergency Council will convene in 72 standard cycles to assess resource allocation. Please maintain communication channel. For updates, 72 cycles, 3 standard days. The Harrow swarm would consume their entire world in less than 1. That cannot be right, Borum whispered. They are the Galactic Union. They protect us. That is their purpose. Yuna said nothing. She watched another city burn on the horizon. The screams of her people echoed through the emergency channels. Mothers calling for children. Leaders begging for guidance. Millions of voices crying out into the void. And the Union told them to wait. Something broke inside Yuna. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was faith. Maybe it was the innocent belief that someone would always come to save them. Whatever it was, it shattered like glass. And something harder took its place. She turned back to her console. Her fingers moved again. But this time not following protocol. This time, she was breaking every rule she had ever learned. What are you doing? Borum asked, broadcasting on all frequencies, every channel, every band. Someone will hear us. But the unauthorized channels, the ones the Union has not approved, we do not know who listens to those. Then we will find out. Yuna opened every frequency available to her. Military bands, commercial frequencies, scientific channels, and the deep space bands that the Union called uncharted territories. The frequencies used by younger species that had not yet proven themselves worthy of full Union membership, species like the humans. Yuna had read about humans in her studies. They were strange creatures. Bilateral symmetry. Warm-blooded. Covered in thin skin that offered no protection from the elements. They lived short lives, barely 100 years, and they had a reputation for violence that made the elder races uncomfortable. The Union had granted them provisional membership only 50 years ago, and many still considered that decision a mistake. Too young, the elder races said. Too aggressive. Too unpredictable. Yuna did not care. She would call anyone who might answer. Her message went out into the stars. Raw. Unfiltered. No diplomatic language. No proper formatting. just the truth. This is Keth 4. We are dying. The Harrow swarm is here. The Union will not reach us in time. If anyone can hear this, please help us, please. We have children. We have families. We do not want to die. Please. She sent it again and again, until her voice grew hoarse, and her eyes burned with tears she had never learned to shed. The hours passed. The swarm continued its work. City after city fell. The population counter on her screen dropped with terrible speed. 800 million. 700 million. 600 million. Borum sat in the corner, no longer watching. He had given up. Most of the others had fled or died. Una was nearly alone in the communications tower, still sending her message into the darkness. Then her console beeped. A new signal. Coming from outside Union space. The frequency was one she had never used before. She opened the channel with trembling hands. A voice filled the room. Deep, confident, speaking in accented galactic standard. Keth 4. This is Captain Tejo of the human ship Horizon's Edge. We received your transmission. We are changing course to your location now. Estimated arrival. 11 hours. Una could not breathe. You are coming. But you are not authorized. The Union has not approved any intervention. There was a pause. When the human spoke again, his voice was harder. People are dying. That is enough authorization. Hold on, Keth 4. We are coming. The channel closed. Una stared at the console. 11 hours. The swarm would kill millions more in that time, but 11 hours was better than 72 cycles. 11 hours meant a chance. She ran to the window and looked up at the burning sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the darkness and the death, strangers were racing toward her world, creatures she had never met. A species the Union did not trust. They owed her people nothing. They had no reason to risk their lives, but they were coming anyway. For the first time since the invasion began, Una felt something other than fear. She felt hope, and in that moment, she made a promise to herself. If she survived this, she would find these humans. She would look into their strange, small eyes and ask them the question that burned in her heart. Why? Why did you come for us? She did not know if she would live long enough to get an answer, but she would try. She would survive. The humans were coming. Captain Tejo stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Edge and listened to the Velen girl's voice crack with fear. He had heard that sound before. In the border conflicts. In the colony raids. In the 100 small wars that humans had fought since reaching the stars. It was the sound of someone watching their world die. He was 34 years old. His face carried 3 scars from battles he preferred not to remember. His hair had started turning gray at the temples. Though his mother said it made him look distinguished, he disagreed. It made him look tired. He was tired. But tired was not the same as broken. Navigation, he said quietly. How far to Keth 4? His navigator, a young woman named Ji-Yeon, checked her screens. 14 hours at standard speed. 11, if we push the engines to maximum. Push them. His first officer, Sujin, stepped closer. She was 5 years older than Tejo, and twice as careful. They had served together for 8 years. She knew when to argue, and when to stay quiet. This was not a quiet moment. Captain, Keth 4 is in Velan sovereign space. Under Union protection, we have no authorization to conduct military operations there. If we intervene without approval, we could trigger a diplomatic incident. We could lose our provisional membership. We could start a war. Tejo turned to face her. His eyes were calm, but there was iron underneath. How many people live on Keth 4? Sujin hesitated. Current estimates suggest approximately 900 million. And what is the survival rate for worlds attacked by the Harrow swarm? Without immediate intervention? Less than 2%. So if we follow protocol, if we wait for Union approval, roughly 880 million people will die. Tejo nodded slowly. Thank you for that information. Commander. Set course for Keth 4. Maximum speed. Sujin stared at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it was there. Understood, Captain. She walked to the helm and began giving orders. The Horizon's Edge, a patrol carrier with a crew of 203, turned toward Velen space and began to accelerate. Taeho returned to his private communication terminal. He had one more call to make. Admiral Dongwu answered on the second signal. He was an older man, perhaps 60, with white hair cut short and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He commanded the Third Fleet 47 ships stationed at the edge of human space. He was also Taeho's mentor, the man who had taught him everything he knew about leadership. Taeho, I received the same transmission you did. I assume you are already on your way? Yes, Admiral. 11 hours. Good. I have 17 ships that can match your speed. We will join you in 10 hours. Taeho blinked. Admiral, you know what this means. The Union will not forgive this. Your career. My career ended the day the swarm killed my daughter. Dongwu's voice was flat, hard. I watched her die on a video screen, while Union diplomats debated whether intervention was politically appropriate. I will not watch that happen again. Not to anyone. Admiral, save your words for the battle, Captain. I will see you at Keth 4. Dongwu out. The screen went dark. Taeho stood alone in the communication room for a moment. Then he returned to the bridge. The next 10 hours passed slowly. The crew prepared for combat. Marines checked their weapons. Engineers ran diagnostics on every system. Medical staff organized supplies for mass casualties. No one complained. No one questioned the order. They were humans. They knew what the swarm did to defenseless worlds. And they knew that someone had to stop it. Lieutenant Commander Hana reported from the flight deck. She commanded the ship's small squadron of attack frigates, fast, deadly ships designed for close combat. All pilots ready, Captain. We can launch on your command. Thank you, Commander. Get some rest while you can. It will be a long fight. Hana saluted and disappeared. She was young, only 26, but she had the steady nerves of a veteran. Taeho was glad to have her. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Yoonji pushed the Horizon's Edge harder than it was designed to go. The old carrier groaned and shook. But it held together. Yoonji whispered to it like a mother comforting a sick child. Just a little more. Just a little further. You can do this. And the ship listened. They arrived at Keth 4 with 30 minutes to spare. Admiral Dongwu's fleet arrived soon after 17 warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Together, the human force was barely 20 ships. Against them, the Harrow swarm numbered in the millions. The odds were impossible. Nobody cared. On the planet's surface, the Velens looked up at their burning sky and saw new shapes emerge from the darkness. Ships. But not Union ships. These vessels were different. Dark. Angular. Brutal. They looked like they had been built for war and nothing else. Their hulls were covered in scorch marks and strange symbols, images of wolves and tigers and eagles, predators that had no meaning to Velan eyes. What are those? A young Velan asked his mother as they huddled in a shelter. She shook her head. I do not know. But Yuna knew. From her station in the communications tower, she watched the human fleet arrive and felt tears roll down her face. They had come, against all logic, against all protocol, against everything the galaxy believed about how civilizations should behave. They had come. Admiral Dongwu's voice echoed across every channel. It was calm, confident, absolutely certain. Harrow Swarm. This is Admiral Dongwu of the United Earth Federation Third Fleet. You are attacking a world under human protection. You have one chance to withdraw. If you do not, we will destroy you. Choose wisely. The swarm did not respond. It never did. It simply continued to consume. Dongwu nodded. All ships, engage. Weapons free. Show them what humans do to monsters. The battle for Keth 4 had begun, And across the galaxy, in the grand halls of the Union capital, the elder races watched in shock as 20 human ships charged into a swarm of millions. They called it madness. They called it suicide. They called it a violation of every principle that had maintained peace for 10,000 years. But on Keth 4, where cities burned and children screamed, they called it something else. They called it salvation. The wolves had arrived. The Harrow swarm moved like a living storm. Millions of bio-organic ships, each one a twisted combination of flesh and metal, turned to face the human fleet. They had consumed 1,000 worlds across the galaxy. They had never been stopped. They did not understand the concept of defeat. They were about to learn. Admiral Dongwu stood at the center of his flagship's command deck, watching the tactical display with calm eyes. His staff officers shouted updates and warnings. Alarms screamed through the corridors. Somewhere behind them, the planet Keth 4 continued to burn. "Deploy the broken shield formation," Dongwu ordered. "All heavy cruisers to the front. Draw their attention. Frigates and carriers hang back and prepare for atmospheric insertion." It was a simple plan. The bigger ships would fight the swarm in space, buying time for the smaller ships to evacuate survivors from the surface. Simple plans were often the best. They were harder to break. The heavy cruisers surged forward, their weapons charging. The lead ship, the Baiko, opened fire first. Plasma cannons tore through the darkness, vaporizing hundreds of swarm vessels in a single blast. The other cruisers followed, creating a wall of destruction between the swarm and the planet. But the swarm was vast. For every ship they destroyed, 10 more took its place, and the swarm fought back. On the horizon's edge, Captain Tejo gripped the arms of his command chair as the ship shook from a near miss. "Damage report!" "Minor hull breach on Deck 7. Containment holding. No casualties." "Good. Keep us between the swarm and those transports. Nothing gets through." The carrier moved with surprising grace for such an old ship. Engineer Yunji had spent the entire journey here making adjustments, optimizing every system, pushing the engines beyond their rated limits. The horizon's edge danced through the chaos like a boxer avoiding punches, but even dancers eventually get hit. A swarm vessel larger than the others, covered in jagged spines, broke through the defensive line and slammed into the horizon's edge. The impact sent crew members flying. Lights flickered. Somewhere deep in the ship, metal screamed. "Direct hit. Reactor containment compromised." Tejo felt cold fear grip his chest, but his voice remained steady. "Engineering. Can you fix it?" Unji's voice came through the communication system, strained but determined. "Give me 10 minutes. You have 5. Down in the engineering section, Unji moved through smoke and sparks. The main reactor was overheating. If the containment field failed, the entire ship would become a ball of fire. She had 5 minutes to prevent that. She had trained for this. Every engineer trained for this. But training was different from reality. In training, her hands did not shake. In training, the faces of her crewmates did not flash through her mind. In training, she was not afraid. She was afraid now. But she kept working. Cables, coolant lines, emergency bypasses. She rewired the containment system in ways the original designers never imagined. She used spare parts from 3 different machines. She held 2 wires together with her bare hands, while a welding torch sealed them in place. The pain was incredible. She ignored it. 4 minutes and 37 seconds later, the reactor stabilized. "Containment restored," she reported, her voice hoarse. "We are still flying." On the bridge, Tejo allowed himself a small smile. "Good work, Yunji. Very good work." While the battle raged in space, Lieutenant Commander Hana led her frigate squadron into the planet's atmosphere. Their mission was simple: find survivors and get them off-world. The execution was anything but simple. The surface of Keth 4 was a nightmare. Cities burned, smoke covered the sky. The swarm had deployed ground forces, twisted creatures that hunted the surviving Velans through the ruins. Hana's frigates screamed down from the heavens, their guns blazing, creating safe zones for evacuation. "Transport Alpha, you are clear for landing. Pick up as many as you can carry." The transports descended. Velan survivors, terrified, wounded, barely understanding what was happening, were loaded onto human ships. Some of them had never seen a human before. They stared at their rescuers with huge, dark eyes, unable to comprehend why these strange creatures were risking their lives for them. On the ground, Marine Sergeant Wu Jin led his squad through the burning streets. His orders were simple: find survivors and bring them back. He had done search and rescue operations before. He had never done one under active swarm assault. His squad fought through waves of swarm creatures, insect-like things with too many legs and mouths full of razor-sharp teeth. They were fast, they were vicious, and there were always more of them. Contact right, Hyun-soo, cover that alley. Private Hyun-soo opened fire, his weapons spraying energy bolts into the darkness. Creatures screamed and died. More took their place. The squad pushed forward. Street by street, building by building, they found survivors hiding in basements, in closets, in the ruins of their homes. Velans who had given up hope, Velans who stared at the humans as if they were angels descending from heaven. In one collapsed building, Wujin found a Velan child. She was small, barely older than a human toddler, with blue-green skin and eyes that had seen too much horror. She was alone. Her family was gone. Wujin picked her up carefully. She weighed almost nothing. Her small body trembled against his chest. "It is okay," he said softly, knowing she probably did not understand his words. "I have you. You are safe now." Outside, a swarm creature lunged from the shadows. Wujin turned, shielding the child with his body, and fired his sidearm with his free hand. The creature fell, twitching, just meters away. The child looked up at him with those huge, dark eyes. "Why?" she asked in broken galactic standard. "Why you help?" Wujin looked down at her. His armor was cracked. His oxygen was running low. His squad was exhausted. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting in the ruins of a dying world. But none of that mattered. "Because someone had to," he said simply. He carried her back to the evacuation point, fighting through 3 more swarm waves along the way. His squad lost 2 members in the retreat: Corporal Minho, Private Yejin. Wujin would remember their names forever. But the child survived. She and thousands of others made it to the transports. They made it to space. They made it to safety. 16 hours after it began, the Battle of Keth 4 ended. The Harrow Swarm, for the first time in its existence, broke and fled. The human fleet, battered and bleeding, held the field. On the bridge of the horizon's edge, Captain Tejo stared at the tactical display. The swarm was retreating. The planet was saved. They had lost 11 crew members, 11 souls who would never go home. But they had saved 4.2 million Velans. Mothers and fathers, children and elders. An entire civilization that had been hours from extinction. Tejo closed his eyes and said a quiet prayer for the dead. Then he opened them again and began giving orders for the cleanup. The battle was over, but the real fight was just beginning. 3 days after the battle, the Galactic Union finally arrived. 12 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel above Keth 4, their silver hulls gleaming in the light of the system's star. They were beautiful ships, elegant, pristine. They had never seen combat. They were built for diplomacy, not war. They were also 3 days too late. Admiral Dongwu stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the Union fleet take position. His ships were scattered around the planet, some still smoking from battle damage. His crew was exhausted. His ammunition was nearly depleted. But they had won. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "the Union flagship is hailing us. High Arbiter Telvan requests your immediate presence for consultation." Dongwu almost smiled. "Consultation. Is that what they are calling it? Sir? Never mind. Tell the High Arbiter I will be there within the hour." Dongwu put on his dress uniform, the one he had not worn since his daughter's funeral, and took a shuttle to the Union flagship. The vessel was enormous, designed to impress rather than fight. Its corridors were lined with artwork from 100 different species. Its meeting halls were decorated with symbols of peace and unity. Dongwu found it slightly sickening. High Arbiter Telvan was waiting for him in the grand chamber. He was an Orixan, a tall, thin creature with pale skin and 4 arms. The Orixans had been part of the Union for 6,000 years. They considered themselves the guardians of galactic order. They did not like surprises, and the human intervention at Keth 4 had been a very unpleasant surprise. Admiral Dongwu. Telvan's voice was cold. Do you understand why you have been summoned? I assume you want to discuss our actions at Keth 4. Discuss? Telvan's 4 hands spread in a gesture of disbelief. Admiral, you have violated 17 separate treaties. You conducted unauthorized military operations in sovereign space. You engaged an enemy force without Union approval. You made unilateral decisions that could have triggered a galactic war. I saved 4 million lives. That is not the point. With respect, High Arbiter, that is exactly the point. Telvan's pale skin flushed with anger. You humans. You are children playing with forces you do not understand. The Union has maintained peace for 10,000 years. 10,000 years of careful diplomacy, of measured responses, of proper procedures. And you nearly destroyed it all in a single day. Dongwu looked at the High Arbiter with calm, tired eyes. Your procedures would have taken 72 hours. The swarm would have killed 800 million people in that time. Your diplomacy would have arrived at a graveyard. That is speculation. No, that is mathematics. I have seen the swarm before. I know how fast they move. I know what they do to worlds that cannot defend themselves. Dongwu paused. I watched them kill my daughter. I watched your diplomats debate proper procedure while she screamed for help. I will not apologize for making sure that did not happen again. The chamber fell silent. Telvan stared at the human admiral. His 4 hands clasped together in discomfort. He had prepared for anger. He had prepared for defiance. He had not prepared for grief. Admiral Dongwu, a new voice echoed through the chamber. May I speak? Everyone turned. Standing at the entrance was a young Velen woman. Her blue-green skin was pale from stress and exhaustion. Her large, dark eyes showed signs of days without sleep, but her voice was steady. Yuna had come to testify. This is a closed hearing, Telvan protested. Unauthorized personnel are not permitted. I sent the distress signal, Yuna interrupted. I called for help. I have the right to be heard. Telvan hesitated. The laws of the Union were clear about witnesses. He could not deny her. Very well. Speak. Yuna walked slowly to the center of the chamber. She looked small against the massive architecture, fragile against the weight of galactic politics. But she did not falter. I was in the communications tower when the swarm arrived. I watched my world begin to die. I sent a message to the Union, begging for help. Do you know what response I received? She pulled out a small device and played the recording. The cold, procedural voice filled the chamber. Request received. Emergency Council will convene in 72 standard cycles to assess resource allocation. The words hung in the air like a verdict. 72 cycles, Yuna continued softly. My people were dying by the millions, and the Union told us to wait, to be patient, to trust in proper procedure. She looked directly at Telvan. How many Velens died while your council was convening? How many children burned while you assessed resource allocation? Telvan said nothing. I broadcast on every frequency I could find. I broke every protocol. I was desperate. And then a voice answered. A human voice. Captain Tejo. He said 4 words that I will never forget. We are coming. Yuna's voice broke slightly, but she pushed forward. They had no orders. They had no authorization. They had no obligation to us. But they came anyway. They flew into a swarm of millions with barely 20 ships. They fought and bled and died for people they had never met. 11 humans gave their lives for my world. 11 strangers who owed us nothing. She turned to face the gathered delegates, representatives from a dozen Union species, all watching in uncomfortable silence. I watched a human soldier carry a Velen child through fire. His armor was broken. His oxygen was failing. He could have left her. He could have saved himself, but he picked her up and carried her to safety, fighting every step of the way. When the child asked him why, do you know what he said? She paused. He said, because someone had to. Yuna faced Telvan again. You call us your protected species. You say the Union keeps us safe. But when we screamed into the void, only the humans answered. They did not ask for permission. They did not form a committee. They simply came. She stepped back, exhausted but unbowed. You want to punish them for saving us? Then punish me too. I broke protocol. I contacted them without authorization. If following the rules means watching my people die, then I will break every rule you have. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Admiral Dongwu looked at the young Valen woman with something like respect. She had done what he could not. She had made the Union see the truth, not as a political argument, but as a moral one. Finally, Telvan spoke. His voice was quieter now, less certain. This hearing is postponed. The Council will review all evidence and reconvene at a later date. Well, it was not an acquittal. But it was not a condemnation either. Outside the chamber, Yuna found Dongwu waiting for her. Thank you, he said simply. She shook her head. I should be thanking you. Your people saved mine. She shook her head. Severi. She shook her head. She shook her head. Mine. We did what anyone should have done. Yuna looked at him with her large, dark eyes. That is what makes you different. Anyone should have done it, but only you did. She walked away, leaving Dongwu alone in the corridor of the great Union flagship. He stood there for a long time, thinking about duty and sacrifice, and the cost of doing what was right. The tribunal would never reconvene. The political cost was too high. The humans had become heroes to too many species, the Velens. Yes, but also a dozen other minor races who had watched the Union fail to protect them. Punishing the humans now would only prove what Yuna had said. The galaxy was changing, and the humans were at the center of that change. Whether the Union liked it or not, the horizon's edge limped home to Earth with scars that would take months to repair. Her hull was cracked in 17 places. Her reactor had nearly melted down twice. 3 of her decks were completely sealed off, too damaged to use, but she had survived, and so had her crew. Captain Tejo stood at the viewport as Earth came into view. The blue marble hung in the darkness of space, beautiful and fragile and utterly unaware of what had happened 14 light-years away. News traveled slowly. Most people on Earth still did not know about Keth 4. They would learn soon enough. When the horizon's edge entered Earth orbit, a crowd of ships came out to greet her. Military vessels, civilian transports, news drones broadcasting live to every corner of human space. The story had spread. Humanity knew what its fleet had done. Tejo hated the attention. Captain, Sujin said quietly, Fleet Command wants you to make a statement. The media requests are overwhelming. Tell them I am busy. Busy with what? Tejo turned away from the viewport. I have 11 letters to write. He spent the next week visiting the families of his fallen crew. 11 homes. 11 doorsteps. 11 conversations that broke his heart. Corporal Minho's mother was a small woman with gray hair and gentle eyes. She cried when Tejo told her how her son had died holding back a wave of swarm creatures, so his squadmates could escape. She cried, and then she hugged Tejo and thanked him for bringing her son's body home. Private Yeyin's father was a former soldier himself. He stood at attention when Tejo arrived. As if greeting a superior officer, he did not cry. He simply nodded and said, She died well. That is all I needed to know. Each visit was different. Each family grieved in their own way. But they all shared one thing. They were proud. Their children had died saving strangers. Their children had been heroes. Tejo did not feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had gotten lucky. A man who had survived when better people had not. But he kept those thoughts to himself. The families needed comfort, not his guilt. On Keth 4, reconstruction began almost immediately. Human engineering teams arrived alongside Velan workers, helping to rebuild what the swarm had destroyed. It would take years, maybe decades. But the Velans were no longer alone. Sergeant Wujin, now promoted to lieutenant against his protests, was assigned to lead a training program for Velan civil defense forces. It was strange work. The Velans had never fought. They did not understand violence the way humans did, but they wanted to learn. "I do not want my people to be helpless again," a Velan leader told Wujin during their first meeting. "Teach us to fight. Teach us to survive." Wujin spent 6 months on Keth 4, training the first generation of Velan defenders. They were not natural soldiers. They were too gentle, too hesitant, too afraid of hurting others. But they learned, slowly, painfully, they learned. On his last day on the planet, the Velan child he had rescued during the battle came to see him. She was older now, recovering from the trauma of the invasion. She still had nightmares. But she was alive. "You are leaving?" she asked. Wujin knelt down to meet her eyes. "I have to go home, but I will come back someday. Promise?" He smiled. "Promise." She hugged him tightly. Then she ran back to her new family, a Velan couple who had lost their own children in the invasion and adopted her as their own. Life continued. It always did. Engineer Unji received a commendation for her work during the battle. Fleet Command offered her a transfer to a newer, better ship. She refused. "The Horizon's Edge needs me," she explained to the confused admiral who made the offer. "She has been through a lot. She deserves someone who knows her." The admiral did not understand, but he approved her request anyway. Unji spent the next 3 months personally overseeing the ship's repairs. She knew every system, every wire, every bolt. When the Horizon's Edge finally left dry dock, she was stronger than she had ever been. Lieutenant Commander Hana was promoted to full commander and given her own squadron. The new unit was called the First Rapid Response Force, humanity's answer to the Union's slow bureaucracy. Their mission was simple: respond to emergencies without waiting for permission. Some in the Union protested. They called it provocative. They called it dangerous. They called it a violation of proper procedure. The Velans called it exactly what they needed. Admiral Dongwu received an unexpected message one morning, a private communication from 6 Union member species. They were small races, like the Velans. Races that had watched the Union fail and the humans succeed. They wanted human consultation for their own defense needs. It was not an official request. It could not be. The Union would never approve. But it was a beginning. Dongwu forwarded the message to Earth's leadership with a single note: "The galaxy is changing. We should be ready." And in the Velan capital, a monument was built. It stood in the center of the newly reconstructed city, a towering statue that could be seen from kilometers away. It depicted a human soldier carrying a Velan child through fire and ash. The soldier's armor was cracked. His helmet was damaged, but his arms held the child gently, protectively. As if nothing else in the universe mattered, the inscription was written in both languages. "They did not know us. They owed us nothing. But they came anyway." Yuna visited the monument on the anniversary of the invasion. She stood before it for a long time, remembering the fear and the despair, and the moment when hope had finally arrived. She thought about the voice that had answered her call, the captain who had changed course without hesitation, the soldiers who had fought and died for strangers. She had found her answer. The question that had burned in her heart since the day of the battle, "Why did you come for us?" finally made sense. The humans had not come because they had to. They had not come because it was easy. They had not come because the rules told them to. They had come because it was right. Because somewhere in their strange, violent, beautiful souls, they believed that no one should die alone. No one should scream into the void without someone answering. It was such a simple thing, such a human thing, and it had changed everything. Yuna turned away from the monument and walked into the city. Around her, Velans and humans worked side by side, rebuilding what had been lost. Children played in parks that had once been rubble, laughter echoed through streets that had known only screams. The stars no longer felt so cold. In the distance, she could see ships rising into the sky, human ships, Valan ships, heading out into the galaxy together. The future was uncertain. The Union was watching. The swarm was still out there somewhere. But for the first time in her life, Yuna was not afraid. The wolves were watching too, and they answered when called. That was enough. That was everything.